Bikini Bottom was a place that was located underneath the Pacific Ocean. The city was populated mostly by different anthropomorphic fish, as well as other different species of anthropomorphic sea life, such as crabs, octopi, whales, etc. Our story begins in a street that called Conch Street. It was a neighborhood that housed a couple of bottomites, but there were three houses that were the most visible of the street. Those houses were the most strange-looking houses in Bikini Bottom too. The first one was a pineapple, the second one was an Easter Island head, and the third one was just a rock. It wasn't like the first two houses, which looked well enough to live in. The inside of it was just a whole bunch of sand. So, there wasn't really anything special about it, to be honest. It was a beautiful Sunday morning too, and everything was as smooth as silk that morning. Well, it was, until there was a loud sound began to blare out of the pineapple house. It was then revealed to be an alarm clock that had the top of a foghorn on it. A yellow hand then pressed the red button on the bottom of it and it soon began to stop. The person who turned off the alarm was revealed to be SpongeBob. SpongeBob was a hyperactive, an optimistic sea sponge who always stayed positive and always greeted everyone he met with a smile. He then immediately jumped out of bed and began to get ready. After getting ready, he immediately grabbed his hat and then opened the door to start walking to work. SpongeBob worked at the Krusty Krab, a restaurant that served the famous Krabby Patty, one of the most iconic things Bikini Bottom had to offer. Everyone in Bikini Bottom loved Krabby Patties and everyone there not surprisingly went there every day. But, SpongeBob soon remembered the Krusty Krab was closed today and soon started to drop. He then walked sadly inside and hung his hat up on his coat rack. SpongeBob was sad he couldn't go to work today, but fortunately, he had an idea. He'd visit his friend Patrick instead. Soon, he began to run over to his friend's house, which was the rock house. He soon knocked on the rocky surface on it. "Patrick, are you home?" called SpongeBob. Soon, the rock began to lift up from the ground and it soon revealed Patrick lying from the bottom of it. A broken bar. "Who's Patrick?" he cluelessly asked. Patrick was a fat, pink, anthropomorphic starfish who was SpongeBob's best friend. As you may as well heard, Patrick was extremely dumb and was less intelligent, and maybe had no intelligence at all, than his pal SpongeBob. He also loved eating and loved to eat anything he saw. SpongeBob soon laughed at the comment Patrick had made. "You're Patrick, don't you remember?" SpongeBob then asked him. "I am," Patrick answered before he soon remembered who he was. "Oh yeah, I am." SpongeBob and Patrick then started to laugh over the fact that the starfish totally forgot his name for a second. The laughing made by SpongeBob and Patrick made its way to the Easter Island Moai house and then woke up their cranky next-door neighbor Squidward. Squidward, despite his name, was a turquoise, anthropomorphic octopus who had a humongous nose, was terribly grumpy and hated SpongeBob and Patrick with all his might. Although Squidward strongly despised them, SpongeBob and Patrick still thought he was their friend and usually kept trespassing into his house. Squidward was just lying in bed before the laughter suddenly woke him. He soon got up and looked out of his window and saw SpongeBob and Patrick were having fun laughing and blowing bubbles in his backyard. Squidward was really annoyed by their behavior, that he then opened his window and soon blurted out, "Can you barnacles heads just knock ITOFF?" SpongeBob and Patrick soon noticed Squidward's loud voice and soon noticed him from his window. "Oh, hi Squidward." SpongeBob smiled at him. "Me and Patrick were just blowing bubbles. Would you like to?" But the octopus soon interrupted him. "I don't want to hear it." Squidward sternly barked at him. "You and Patrick are annoying the living shrimp out of me. Are you two kelp for brains even gonna do something that doesn't involve you two acting like complete morons?" SpongeBob thought for a moment. "Well, me and Patrick were gonna go jellyfishing at a broken bar," he responded. "You're welcome to come with us if you want." Squidward then chuckled nasally at the idea of him jellyfishing. "Ha, ha, 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 jellyfishing a broken bar," he snorted. "That's the stupidest I've..." But then he stopped. Squidward soon had a brilliant, spectacular idea. Although it sounded a bit wicked, he was sure it would get SpongeBob and Patrick off his back. SpongeBob, Squidward then said calmly. What is it, Squidward? SpongeBob asked. How would you and Patrick feel if I told you about the green jellyfish that flies around jellyfish fields? Squidward answered. SpongeBob then looked confused. Green jellyfish? What do you mean by that, Squidward? You two haven't heard? Squidward replied. Well, the green jellyfish is a mysterious jellyfish that secretly lurks around jellyfish fields. Many jellyfishers have tried to catch it before, but unfortunately, no one was able to catch this strange-looking jellyfish. A broken bar, he then lied. SpongeBob then looked really astonished and then turned to Patrick. You hear that, Patrick? He exclaimed. There's a green jellyfish that flies around jellyfish fields. Maybe if we try to catch it, we might be known as the bestest jellyfishers who ever lived. He then trilled. Patrick then replied by saying, ha, ha, I don't get it, while smiling happily to himself. Okay, Squidward, SpongeBob called back. Me and Patrick are gonna go catch this green jellyfish you were talking about. We'll see you later. So with that, SpongeBob and Patrick soon ventured into SpongeBob's house to start getting ready to jellyfish. Squidward then watched them walk out of this backyard while he soon started to grin mischievous. Those two bottom feeders are sure gonna catch something alright. The feeling of hunger and coldness, that is, he thought to himself while diabolically laughing away to himself. Soon enough, SpongeBob and Patrick soon arrived in jellyfish fields. SpongeBob was now wearing his iconic jellyfishing glasses, while Patrick still looked the same as before. Where do you think the green jellyfish is, SpongeBob? Patrick asked his best friend. SpongeBob thought for a moment. Maybe it's near that bush over there? SpongeBob responded before pointing to a kelp bush near them. The two of them then started to run over to it and began their search for the green jellyfish. 8 hours later, broken bar. SpongeBob and Patrick kept looking for the jellyfish they were looking for, but unfortunately, they didn't have much luck. Patrick then felt his tummy rumble. SpongeBob, he moaned. I'm starving. I know, buddy. SpongeBob answered. You just need to hold on for a little bit longer. I sure will be able to spot that jellyfish soon. A broken bar. While SpongeBob was talking, he accidentally tripped on something and fell headfirst into the grassy sand, which then caused his glasses to soon shatter into pieces. It was a little brown box that resembled a treasure chest. SpongeBob then noticed it and got a closer look at it. Say, what's this? He said in confusion. He then picked it up, while Patrick soon looked at it too. Fortunately, the box was unlocked and SpongeBob was able to open it without a problem. When he opened it, SpongeBob and Patrick started at it in amazement. There were 3 necklaces inside of it. The first one had a piece that was shaped like a moon at the end of it. The second had a piece that resembled a sun, and the last one had a piece that looked like a rainbow flower. A broken bar. SpongeBob and Patrick gasped in unison. SpongeBob then took out the necklaces from the chest, and both SpongeBob and Patrick looked at them with great amusement. What do you think they are, SpongeBob? Patrick asked SpongeBob. I don't know, Patrick, SpongeBob responded, but whatever they are, they sure look pretty. While SpongeBob and Patrick kept staring at the necklaces, 2 of them began to detect SpongeBob and Patrick, and a multicolored aroma began to surround them. Although Patrick was quite dumb, he soon noticed them and then got a bit worried. A broken bar. SpongeBob, what's going on with these things? Patrick asked with great concern. SpongeBob then noticed the 2 of them and soon began to feel distressed. I'm not entirely sure, SpongeBob answered, but I have a feeling that they. Unfortunately, SpongeBob's sentence was cut short, as the 2 necklaces quickly wrapped around SpongeBob and Patrick. Help, SpongeBob. I'm being strangled, Patrick shouted, while struggling to try to get the necklace off. Don't worry, Patrick, wheezed SpongeBob. I'm sure these things are removable. We just need to. But before SpongeBob could finish that sentence, purple and orange gas soon began to arise out of their necklaces. Cough, cough. I can't breathe, gagged Patrick. SpongeBob tried to absorb the gas, but unfortunately, the gas was too strong and kept leaving his spongy body. It's okay, Patrick, SpongeBob coughed. Just stay calm, okay? I'm sure everything will be just. But, SpongeBob noticed his arm was feeling strange. Purple fur was beginning to cover it, and it eventually covered the whole lot of it. Darker purple fur then covered his hand, and the entirety of it was soon covered in fur. His arm then got more bigger, and his hands also soon grew massive. Paw pads then started to grow at the bottom of the hand. SpongeBob was then left with an animal-like hand. "What the scallop?" he exclaimed, feeling shocked at it. He soon noticed his other arm and saw the same thing was happening to it. The same fur grew on it, and it grew like his other arm and eventually looked like his newly changed other arm. SpongeBob couldn't do anything but look at his new furry arms. He then felt his legs were feeling really odd and soon noticed them change too. They were growing purple fur like his arms, and soon started to get more chunkier. Eventually, all that pressure from his growing caused the bottom of his pants to rip. His feet were the next thing to change, but they weren't shown changing. Darker purple fur covered his feet like his hands, and they soon began to feel funny. They eventually rearranged themselves into paws, and he felt paw pads grow underneath them. And soon enough, his feet began to grow and grow and grow until, boom, his socks and shoes were soon destroyed. SpongeBob was horrified seeing his foot were now wrecked. Soon enough, his square body started to change. He felt the base of it begin to twist and turn, and it soon began to split in half. His square pants also started to fall down as SpongeBob tried to pull them up. The bottom of it began to reshape and started to look more rounder and pudgier. Purple fur began to grow on it too, and we soon had a body that resembled a feline's. Then, a long purple tail started to sprout from his bottom and eventually grew longer than one of Squidward's tentacles. The top of his body was the last part of change. Purple fur covered his entire face, and the upper body was soon indulged in fur. It soon changed shape like his lower body, and it then looked more cat-like. He felt his hearing go away for a little bit, but 2 purple cat ears soon appeared on his head. His nose started to shrink, as it became black and wet. Eventually, it soon resembled a cat nose. SpongeBob's teeth started to fall out of his mouth, and it soon started to stretch and become more longer. His eyes lost their eyelashes, and their round shape soon started to look a bit wonkier, but his sclera and his pupils stayed pretty much the same. Eventually, SpongeBob now looked like a purple cat creature. SpongeBob looked at his new body and felt really scared. Patrick, on the other hand, felt even more horrified that his best friend had somehow transformed into some weird-looking monster. He almost forgot that this monster was SpongeBob in the first place and thought it was a creature from his dreams who was going to eat him. Monster! Patrick screamed. SpongeBob was concerned about his friend and tried to calm him down. "Don't worry, Pat," reassured SpongeBob. "I'm not a monster. It's me, your old buddy Sponge." But SpongeBob's sentence was cut short as dumb old Patrick started to hit him with a large rock. "Patrick, way oh oof," SpongeBob grunted as his stupid friend kept hitting him with the rock. But unknown to the sea star, orange fur was starting to grow on his arms. Patrick didn't notice the fur and continued to hit SpongeBob with the rock. Eventually, the fur covered most of his arms, and darker orange fur was soon starting to grow on the tips of his arms. He suddenly felt a bit of a pain in the tips of them as they started to grow fingers. He then began to gain a paw padding underneath them. Soon enough, his hands had finished changing, and they soon began to get more larger and bulgier. Patrick soon noticed his new arms and stopped hitting SpongeBob. He put the rock down and looked at his transformed arms. "Now my hands are monsters," he shrieked. "Get MOFF! Get MOFF! Get MOFF!" SpongeBob watched in confusion as Patrick's stupidity tried to wave them off as he thought they were now trying to eat him. Meanwhile, orange fur started to sprout from his legs. Darker orange fur soon started to cover the bottom of his legs and then transformed into big paws as he gained a paw padding to them too. They eventually bulged out and immediately ripped his green shorts. Patrick then noticed his legs and now thought his legs were monsters too. "Make it stop," he hollered as he attempted to pull his new limbs off his body. At the same time, the orange fur soon reached his belly and soon covered it up. He almost felt that his fat was starting to melt away as he soon had a slim figure. A yellow oval then appeared on his belly. while an orange tail began to grow behind him. Patrick then noticed his new body and tail. And you probably know what's gonna happen next, right? He was now starting to pull his head off his body in a panic like an absolute hooligan in the middle of jellyfish fields. Speaking of his head, yellow fur began to grow around his mouth and eventually became a big muzzle. A black, wet, nose then appeared over the mouth. Patrick's only tooth then fell out of his mouth and it eventually stretched really wide like SpongeBob's. Orange fur soon grew on one side of the top of his head and darker orange fur then grew on the other side of it. His pointed head then started to change shape and it soon got more flatter and looked like it two bumps. Two dark orange ears then grew out of the sides of his head. His eyebrows gracefully blew off his forehead. His eyes changed shape and now looked similar to SpongeBob's. The only difference were his sclera and pupils. He soon started to shrink down to SpongeBob's size, and soon, Patrick's transformation was complete. Patrick looked at his new body and started to have a panic attack. SpongeBob tried to come close to him to try to calm him down. "Don't look at me, I'm a monster," he cried before bursting into tears. "Don't worry, Patrick, a broken bar," SpongeBob answered back. "I'm sure everything will be just what." Suddenly, SpongeBob began to feel a bit odd. Patrick soon stopped crying and started to feel odd too. SpongeBob and Patrick were starting to feel more weaker and duller. Their eyes were beginning to lose their sclera and pupils and were now fading to black. Then, they felt their souls were being transferred out of their bodies, as they soon left them in a mist. Eventually, the souls started to fade away into nothing. After their souls vanished into nothing, white pupils soon appeared in their eyes and their mouths soon cracked into perpetual wide toothless grins. SpongeBob and Patrick were no more, and in their place were Catnap and Dog Day. The two smiling critters soon started to walk along this new environment they were in. But, something then caught their eyes. Beyond the field, were three oddly shaped houses. They liked the one in the middle the best and thought the two others looked too unsatisfying. Catnap soon noticed the strange individual in the window and signaled Dog Day to look at him. Dog Day looked closely and soon saw him too. The smiling critters then had an idea and grabbed the last necklace that was not worn yet. Maybe that strange creature would like to be a part of a broken bar. A little while after Broken Bar, Squidward was just about to go to bed and was still being satisfied by the fact that SpongeBob and Patrick were still in jellyfish fields still trying to catch that green jellyfish. "I hope I never get to see those two barnacle brains again." A broken bar, he said to himself while trying to tuck himself into bed. "Good night, Clary." A broken bar, he calmly said to his clarinet as he also tucked it into bed too. Suddenly, he heard his doorbell ring and soon noticed its sound. "Who could that be?" he remarked sarcastically. Squidward then put off his nightgown and began to walk downstairs. He soon turned on the light and was greeted with the most biggest shock ever. "WHWH what?" he shouted in horror as he saw the two figures standing at his own front door. Catnap and Dog Day were standing right at it, and Catnap then began to hold out the necklace for him. He immediately screamed in terror and Catnap and Dog Day started to enter his house. He shrieked as he immediately slammed his front door. "Oh, Neptune," Squidward panted. "What have I done?" Okay, I'm a broken bar. Get it together." Squidward, a broken bar, he panicked while trying to calm himself down. Squidward then immediately ran off and came back with some nailed boards and a hammer and soon started to pound his door down. Squidward then noticed Catnap and Dog Day were standing right outside his window and were looking in at him menacingly. Squidward immediately began to nail down the window too, but unfortunately for him, Catnap used his pendant to transform him and Dog Day into mist and they soon went through of Squidward's window and were now standing face to face with him. Squidward then ran screaming into his closet and tried hiding from the two smiling critters. "None of this would be happening if I didn't tell SpongeBob and Patrick about that stupid green jellyfish," he worried. Mist started to go through Squidward's door and Catnap and Dog Day were now in the closet with him. Squidward then ran squealing out of the closet. While the two of them kept following Squidward, he started to run around everywhere in his house trying to hide from them, but Catnap and Dog Day kept finding him. This went on for a couple more minutes, until Squidward's house eventually flipped over and caused a giant mess to be created. Everything in his house was now just a big mess, and Squidward awkwardly tried to get up from it all. After fixing himself, he noticed the necklace Catnap tried to give him was now perched on his neck. Squidward then noticed it and immediately began to feel worried. "Uh-oh, a broken bar," he said with great concern. Soon, sky blue mist began to come out of the pendant of the necklace and Squidward began to cough and splutter. Squidward looked at his arms and saw that white fur was growing on them. They eventually were fully spread across his arms. He then noticed his tentacles and saw that they were turning sky blue and were starting to resemble hooves. He then felt them bulge out, while Squidward looked in horror at his newly changed arms. Underneath Squidward's nightshirt, white fur was growing all around his body and he then felt it get more pudgier and pudgier until it eventually ripped off his body, revealing his newly exposed transformed body in the process. Squidward was starting to panic a bit about this. Squidward's forelegs then started to merge together as white fur then grew over them. His forefeet merged together too and they soon looked like sky blue hooves, while they destroyed his bunny slippers in the process. Squidward felt everything was starting to look a lot bigger as he felt he was starting to shrink down to Dog Day and Catnap's size. A sky blue tail that resembled a horse's one began to grow out of Squidward's rear. At the same time, Squidward felt something odd going on between his legs and his, or her, gender was now fully changed. Now, it was time for Squidward's head to change. She felt her neck shrink down as it started to retract into her body. Squidward then felt a luxurious, sky blue mane grow out of her head, as it beautiful flapped down over her eyes. Squidward tried to sway it out of the way, but soon noticed something strange was happening to her nose. It was starting to get much more smaller and it eventually merged an accordion with her mouth and it soon eventually became a muzzle. White fur then grew across her face, while all her teeth fell out and her mouth started to get more wider and bigger. A white little horn started to grow out of her forehead. Ears that resembled the ones a unicorn would have then grew out of her head, while her eyes started to gain the same shape Dog Day and Catnap had. The only difference was that her sclera and pupils stayed the same. A few more changes later and her transformation was finally complete. Squidward then looked at her new body and felt really worried. "Oh dear, broken bar," she worried. "What will everyone think of me now? Will I be stuck like this forever?" Squidward then noticed her new voice and immediately covered her mouth. This felt really awkward, especially with the new voice. But, before Squidward had any more time to react, she was feeling tired and dull. Soon, her soul began to fly out of her mouth as her eyes began to darken. Her soul eventually started to fade away from existence and the new smiling critter's eyes gained two white pupils. The new smiling critter mouth then turned into a big grin and she then jumped around with glee. Squidward was no longer there and Crafty Corn was instead in his place. Catnap and Dog Day soon saw her and starting to run over to her. They then embraced each other and they gave each other a great big hug. At the same time, Squidward's destroyed house soon started to change appearance. It was getting more bigger and eventually looked like some abandoned daycare. The three smiling critters were now home and they were gonna tell the other critters Hoppy Hopscotch, Baba Bobaffin, Bobby Bear Hug, Picky Piggy and Kickin' Chicken about the big adventure they just had.